Hello everyone, we got some big news today. Bungie has revealed the first of the 3 new Stasis subclasses coming to Beyond Light, starting with the Warlock's Shadebinder subclass. First, let's just talk about Stasis itself. We've seen a lot of gameplay of it, a lot of cinematic trailer stuff, but until recently, all we really knew was that you could freeze stuff, and that's it. Not really how it all works. Now, we do. A little bit, anyway. Stasis is the first new element introduced into the game since the game launched. To start, the subclass is an element of control. It's less focused on dealing damage and more about controlling your enemies or the space that they occupy, or using it as a defensive tool. You'll be able to slow or freeze enemies and then shatter them if you so choose. Before we get into Warlock specifically, let's talk about how the subclass tree will work. Bungie has mentioned that they wanted customizability to come back to the game in this area, and it seems like they're certainly trying to make that happen. Each Stasis subclass gives players the option to customize abilities like grenades, movement, class abilities, etc. with aspects. You'll also be able to modify those aspects with fragments. Have I already gotten them mixed up multiple times in this script? Yes, I have. Aspects will offer players new traits or modifiers for your abilities among potentially other things. You can mix and match these as you see fit. An example of an aspect for the Warlock was shown here, Frost Pulse. Casting your Rift generates a shockwave that freezes nearby combatants. This obviously sounds very much like a subclass trait that you would find in a typical subclass block in the game. You can then slot a fragment into that aspect for an additional effect. The example given here is Whisper of Bonds, where you get super energy from defeating frozen targets with weapons, but you lose 10 intellect and discipline. This sounds very mod-like in nature, and at the moment, I think it would be safe to say that fragments are simply mods for your aspects. They are more passive in nature. The combo here would be aggressively drop a rift on some enemies, they get frozen, you kill them with guns, boom, super energy. Aspects are unique to each Stasis subclass. They focus on specific abilities for that class, while fragment slots are class agnostic, meaning fragments are more generalized mods that can fit in any of the Stasis subclasses. Now, if you're a little confused as to what we can and can't actually do, you're not alone. I've come to this conclusion based only on the screenshots and the article provided. This is all an assumption. I'm not 100% sure if this is how it's going to work, but it's my best idea. The guess is that each aspect comes with a certain amount of fragment slots. So, for example, Frost Pulse comes with 1 fragment slot. You would add up the total amount of fragment slots across all of your aspects, and that's how many fragment slots you would have. Aspects might have weaker effects, but more fragment slots as a trade-off. Again, this is an assumption based on limited information. The Warlock itself comes with the following abilities: Winter's Wrath, Shatter Shockwave, and melee attack, Penumbral Blast. Penumbral Blast is a quick jolt of stasis energy that erupts from your staff, instantly freezing targets, and again, that is your melee attack. The super, Winter's Wrath, is where the Warlock can summon their staff and fire projectiles that instantly freeze targets. You can then detonate these targets with Shatter Shockwave, disintegrating nearby frozen opponents. Looking at the subclass screen here, I'm going to make a couple of assumptions. Like, on the Rift ability, you'll still be able to swap between healing and Empowered Rift, which is good. Your movement ability is likely to have the 3 options we normally get. The third ability looks like the melee ability, which you cannot swap out at all, but again, you might be able to mod it with an aspect. And the final ability looks like your grenade, of which you have likely 3 options, one of them being Stasis Field, which is that AoE sphere grenade that you've likely seen in the trailers. We've seen a Hunter grenade as well make a giant wall, and a grenade that creates a field that freezes after being deployed. It wouldn't shock me if all of the grenades across all the classes are the same. I think that about wraps up the Warlock for now. The Titan is going to be covered on the 3rd, and the Hunter will be covered on the 8th. I plan on making videos for the other two, so no worries about that. As for my thoughts, I finally got to watch some of the footage from Gamescom, actual gameplay with the UI on the screen and not just trailer footage, and things look pretty solid. Is Titan looking like Fist of Havoc, but you can freeze stuff? Yeah, a bit, but I'm not terribly devastated about that right now because I'm just generally excited for new subclasses. I am very excited to have back fully customizable subclasses again. However, in Destiny 1, there were generally only a few builds that were viable in the first place, and I have a sneaking suspicion that even though we have much more freedom in how we choose to set up our Stasis subclass, that Destiny 2 will likely end up being the same. There will absolutely be builds that are more optimized when set up in specific ways, the illusion of choice. I would still absolutely rather have the illusion of choice than no choice at all, though, even if the subclass trees in Destiny are finally pretty well optimized. But there's nothing that says Bungie couldn't add more aspects or fragments going into future seasons, or even new or varied grenades, melees, or supers, which would make this system even more appealing than the current one, where we're just at the mercy of Bungie introducing new subclass trees. Individual tuning of fragments and aspects might be a little bit easier as well. Plus, if this experiment goes well, there is the slightest potential that current subclasses would get similar treatment. I don't expect that to happen for quite a while, though, if it does. I like the concept of a more defense-based subclass. We are so focused on high damage output in most of the subclasses, and there's only a couple of branches that are support or utility focused, and even for those, for a lot of players, those just basically come down to drop Ward of Dawn, drop Well of Radiance, drop Shadow Shot. The reason is partly that most enemies in the game are not a threat and die very easily, so there's never a need for crowd control or support-based tactics outside of the most extreme conditions. You're not really rewarded for that crowd control playstyle because the reward is usually killing enemies easier, but when you can just shoot them down immediately anyway, what's the point of defense? I do wonder if and how the game will change knowing that we have better defensive options now. I might be getting my hopes up. I don't really anticipate significant adjustments, but you never know. It would not surprise me at all if having at least one Stasis subclass in higher level content became the norm because of their crowd control capabilities, which is where those tend to shine. Crowd control is actually rewarded a bit more in higher level content because things are inherently more lethal. Anyway, guys, that's what I got for you on Stasis thus far. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.